Hello, welcome to the Horti-Culturalists. I'm Matthew Lucas.
And I'm Stephen Ryan.
And we post a video every week on a Friday. So if you want to know what our burning horticultural adventures are going to be, do hit subscribe and follow our adventure.
And don't forget our Monday shorts. So if you've got a question you'd like to ask me, pop it in the comments below and we'll get round to answering it on a Monday.
We will, but Stephen, I'm sensing that marine air. It's
Yes.
feeling a little familiar. Where are we?
Yes, we're at the Geelong Botanic Gardens in Geelong, funnily enough.
Funnily enough.
Yes. We're today going to engage with a specific part of the garden, which
Yep.
is known as the 21st Century Garden, and it's behind us. And we're going to look at some of the plants growing here.
Yep.
We're also going to discuss the sort of processes and why it's the 21st Century Garden,
Yeah.
what sort of plants they've used to illustrate what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
I think there's quite a few lessons to be learnt potentially.
Excellent. Well, we'll put all the links to the Geelong Botanic Gardens below. It's an amazing garden. Geelong is a beautiful, beautiful city. It's kind of across the bay from Melbourne. So if you are visiting Melbourne, drive around, or you can even sail across.
Yes, you could.
And come and visit Geelong. Anyway, let's go and look at what's going on in this garden. And there's already amazing things that are capturing my attention.
Well, there's certainly a few plants here I want to go and say hello to.
Okay. Hello. All right, Stephen, the 21st Century Garden. It is here before us. And that amazing tree, remind me what it is behind
The
us.
pink one
Yeah.
is Ceiba.
We'll go and look at that in a minute
Yeah.
because it's stunning. And we've
Fabulous.
seen one in the Melbourne Botanic Gardens,
We
but I must
certainly have.
say, this is a little lower slung. So you actually can get right into the flowers.
Yeah, you can see them right up close,
Beautiful.
which is fabulous.
So, 21st Century Garden, what was the idea?
All right, well, the garden originally was, the 19th century garden is the lower part of the garden, and that's the most sheltered spot within the gardens, or certainly was back in the 19th century. And it was where they started their plant nursery. So the paths there are all straight. The whole thing is sort of systematic in a way because, of course, Daniel Bunce, the director, was probably Australia's earliest botanist. So he was about, discovering plants, putting them in order, doing all those things. So it's a very ordered part of the garden.
And what era are we talking about?
Mid-19th century. So the garden started in 1851.
Right.
And so the first plantings would have been in that first
That period.
decade. And so that's the very early part of the garden.
Yeah.
The central part of the garden is considered to be sort of the 20th century garden.
Yeah.
And a lot of that was being developed when I was a child coming to visit the director at the time.
In the early 20th century.
No, in the mid-20th century and later.
You had Wardy and you.
No, hardly, although I wouldn't mind dressing that way. And the director I remember then was George Vafiopoulos, and he moved the gardens forward by a long stretch. But unfortunately, the front gates of the gardens, as it was at the time, which are to my right over here, are hidden. You couldn't see them from anywhere in Geelong. Most people of Geelong didn't even know the gardens were here. So when we get into the late 20th century, it was decided to extend the gardens yet further because it's surrounded by the Eastern Beach Park.
Yeah.
And so there's space where you could move the gardens out if you had the finances and desire, and they did. So they created what they now call the 21st Century Garden, which admittedly was created in the last part of the previous century, but nonetheless, with the idea of showcasing interesting, quirky, attractive plants that haven't been used in gardening much, or at least not in current years. Also a collection of local endemic plants of the Geelong area.
Yeah.
And for me, one of the interesting things about it is quite a number of the plants they've used were actually really popular plants back in Victorian times, but they're illustrating a modern style of gardening.
And I guess the other thing too is climate here. So this is unirrigated. So this is about a sustainable garden in terms of water.
Yes, in fact, that was part of the brief, I think, was to create a garden that you didn't have to water many of the plants. So a lot of the plants here come from hot, dry climates, deserts, Mediterranean regions around the world. And, just glancing around, I can see plants from New Caledonia, Madagascar, southern Africa, all over the place.
Canary Islands.
Yeah, the Canary Islands,
Your
dragon
favourite
trees.
botanic hotspot.
Yes, I do enjoy going there. I'd like to get back again. So there was that side of it. And they also wanted to show how you could manage drainage within these sites. So the whole area has been excavated out. So there's this sort of hollow.
And let's just tell people too that this was effectively a car park.
Yep, exactly. This is where I would have parked back in the 1960s.
The
and
early 20th century.
Yeah, although I didn't get a driver's license until well into the 70s. But anyhow, we would have parked outside the gates here on a car park that just had a couple of big shade trees. And so this whole area here is part of the old Eastern Beach Park, and it's now been incorporated into the gardens, which takes the gardens closer to the water, so it's closer to the sea, and it makes it more obvious for people who are coming in here to find a front entrance to the garden. So it certainly made a big difference to visitor numbers and things once the 21st century garden was in place.
All right. So we're going to do a little walk and talk now, because I'm just curious about this central depression, can we call it?
The low point in the garden.
The low point. Because it's kind of sandy, which does have echoes of Cranbourne Botanic Garden, which we visited in a previous video. So let's go and have a walk, and you can just explain to me why.
Good. I will do my best.
All right, Stephen. So
All right.
the gardens has this sort of sandy depression. Let's call it depression. Let me just spin around and show the people. The sun's right there.
Yes.
There we are.
All right. Yeah, so you've got this large expanse of sand, and one might well ask why.
Very good question.
Yes. So the sand is really a void that is meant to sort of take the place of lawn. So it doesn't need to be watered.
Yeah.
So a couple of large rocks have been installed to give it a different sort of levels
Large
and things. So big, large rocks in it. And it's very similar to the one we saw at Cranbourne, I have to admit, although not on quite the same scale. But because it's a sand-based thing too, water will percolate down through it. So when they get heavy rains, or the irrigation in the place has watered things that have needed water, not that this area needs lots of watering, then it will all percolate down through drains, and it'll end up in this sort of billabongy area, which is really basically just an area where water seeps from. So at different times of the year, it will be much higher level.
Spin around.
Yes, at the moment, one of the driest autumns we've had on record, but nonetheless, there's still some water down in there, which is fairly impressive considering the weather.
And it's not meant to be an aesthetic moment, is it? Because let's just say it's not.
No.
So it's not a pond, it's not a lake, it's not decorative. It's very much a drainage point, isn't
it's
it?
a drainage point, but what they've tried to do is turn it into something that may or may not be overly decorative, but it looks sort of like a natural sort of area where water would congregate.
Yeah,
so
which it is doing.
Yeah, and in Australia we call them billabongs.
There you go.
Yeah, so there you go. And I think what they're trying to do here is change our aesthetics a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, do we always need to live with a bright green lawn?
No, because lawns are water guzzling and a monoculture.
Yeah, exactly.
Very boring.
And, you know, is it a good idea to make sure that you keep water on site instead of draining it off down the street? So, you know, there's all these sorts of things that they really thought through when they put this in.
And when we were talking to Andrew at the Royal Melbourne Botanic Gardens, Guildford's volcano, one of the things that they're doing there is capturing rainwater runoff from the higher streets above the gardens to use for irrigation.
Yeah.
Well, that interesting. I mean,
well, none of us want to have our own garden look quite like this, I'm sure. And certainly you wouldn't want as big a space as this in your home garden that wasn't dedicated to putting something green in. But it sort of works here with the type of plant material they've used.
Let's spin around and show the people.
Yes, there's lots of fabulous plants and trees in the garden.
Which we'll look at.
Yes, there's giant bunya pines, there's old eucalypts, there's trees from all over the world. And they're augmented, I guess, to a sense by the metal trees that are growing over on the other side of the garden.
Okay, let's show
Not
you.
everybody's taste again.
There are the metal trees. Just there.
And that actually is interesting because that's where the new front gates of the Botanic Gardens are.
Yeah.
And it's much easier to find. The metal trees grab people's attention from a distance so they can see them. And the front area is actually like a boat about to take off into the distance. So there's a little bit of poetic license taken here with the different things that they've incorporated into the garden.
All right. Well, let's take a spin around the periphery then and just look at some of the things that have been planted here and then also that have been incorporated into this garden.
Yep, good idea.
All right, Stephen, this is one of my favourite moments in the garden here.
Yeah.
And maybe it's because of the mature trees. So you mentioned this is a car park. There were obviously some car parky trees.
Yes.
So firstly, what is this incredible tree that's above us?
All right, well, it's one of Daniel Bunce's plantings, and it's an Araucaria bidwillii, or the bunya pine from the mountains of northern Queensland. And it was a really important food plant for the Aboriginals. They used to have specific trees that belonged to specific tribes in that area. And whenever there was what they call a mast year, when there was lots of cones had been produced, they would have big feasts up there. So the locals would all get together and they'd all roast bunya nuts and have a lovely time.
Aha.
Bit of a corroboree and all those things going on at the same time.
But also, it seems to me a very kind of 19th century specimen tree, like a monkey puzzle, that sort of ilk.
It's exactly that, because those sorts of trees were seen as exotic and sculptural and interesting. And that's what I said before about a lot of the plants here. Some of them are old and were planted way back at the beginning, but the types of plants that they were planting have an almost modern look about them. I mean, they work well with the modern aesthetic as well.
So the other thing is then, you're working in a landscape with mature trees. This is,
like
well,
that.
you know, 150 years old.
Yeah.
And then you kind of start from scratch. So these great sort of sential specimens can look really awkward and weird.
They can.
What I love here is just this layer of planting. So it's dry shade and this whole garden isn't watered, but it's kind of got this wonderful tropical feel layering.
It has. It's, I mean, the stone walling itself for a start gives interest, and it also stabilises the soil because, of course, they've had to excavate around that big tree. So they've had to keep the soil up around the trunk and then excavate well out from it so that they didn't damage the basic root ball. And then they've planted up the walls with bromeliads of South America. So there's Dyckias and other sundry things.
Oh, I was going to say, bromeliad, Dyckia, puya.
Yeah.
What is it, Stephen?
Well,
what's the orange one? It's
the orange one is one of the Dyckias, or I'm not sure whether it's Dyckia or Dyckia. I don't know who it was named
Let's
after.
not go there.
Yeah, but anyhow. And as I always stress, you should try and pronounce it if it's a commemorative in the same way as the original name would have been pronounced. So anyway, it could be either.
Clive.
Yeah, Clivia, yes, all that stuff. So
Dahlia,
I think our viewers are used to my pedantry when it comes to those sorts of things. So we've got those, and then you get up onto the soil around the big tree, and they've planted an array of dry climate but somewhat tropical looking plants. So,
really gorgeous.
Yeah, and fabulous textural things, and it seems to tie in under the canopy of the bunya pine in a rather handsome way. So you've got Cordylines, you've got Xanthorrhoeas, the grass trees.
Which has got a magnificent flower spike.
Yeah, they're a sort of an iconic Australian plant, quite obviously.
There's a cycad.
Yes, there's some beautiful cycads in there, some of which I'm sure are Australian native ones.
Yeah.
And of course, one of my favourite palms, which is the Mediterranean dwarf fan palm, Chamaerops humili. And when I say dwarf, it still grows to a...
That ain't no dwarf.
No, it goes to a big plant.
And they're multi-stemmed too.
Yeah, so it takes up a lot of room that way as well as that way.
Which we saw in the Melbourne Botanic Gardens in our cold climate palm video. Which
well, exactly. And I think they're fabulous plants. So I really like the Chamaerops. If you've got space to plant one, keeping in mind they're extremely slow growing. I mean, I don't know how old that one over there is, but that could have been moved into there from some other part in the garden, and it could actually be a really original plant. So it might be 150 years old.
Yeah.
So we're not going to live long enough to worry, basically.
Well, this is a magic spot in the garden, but there are others, and there's other things in the periphery. So let's go and look at some other things that have caught both our fancies.
Yes, there's some great plants in this 21st century garden.
Well, Stephen, one of the amazing trees in this area is this, which we are quite familiar with. Tell us everything.
All right, yes. Well, we're looking at a dragon blood tree, a Dracaena draco. They come from the Canary Islands mainly, although there's another group of them, slightly different species or subspecies that comes from the Socotra Islands, part of Yemen.
That's right.
I so want to go to the Socotra Islands. This one was moved into here as an established specimen, and they get incredibly top heavy, and in fact old ones have a tendency to sort of fall apart.
Well, I was going to ask, so you can see this incredible structure here.
Yeah.
So in the wild, are they collapsing? I mean, how do they manage the process in the wild?
All right, well, they live for a long time. They do get a big heavy top on them.
Yeah.
They're inclined to split and fall apart in due course, but they've had ample time to seed and procreate and do all the things they need to do.
Yeah.
And also, when they hit the ground, the pieces that break off, they can often take root, and then the next generation will start from there. So,
Because often with, euphorbias and succulents, is this in that
yeah,
neck of the woods?
yeah.
Some will literally root lying on the surface of the
If
soil.
you plant Dracaena draco in a reasonably humid climate, it will actually start producing aerial roots on it. And I can see this one actually has, you can see a big lump coming down up there,
Oh, yeah.
which could be classed as an aerial root. If you cut that piece off and planted it, it would grow.
Ah, right.
So there you go.
It's an incredible tree. I don't know, there's something gothic, eerie, weird. If you were going to draw a plant, you would not draw anything that has that silhouette.
No, probably not, unless you're a very small child drawing
Yeah.
houses and trees, you might.
With an abstract tendency. Anyway,
Yes.
right in front of us is something else we have to go and look at. So let's turn around, bright eyes, and look
Yes.
at that.
All right, what a good idea.
Another thing that leaps out at me is this.
Oh, yes.
Now, I would just call this, what are they called? Like ponytail palms or something?
Well, yeah, ponytail. The palm designation is, of course, completely wrong.
It's not a palm.
No, it's not a palm at all. But it's often sold as a ponytail palm. You get that fabulous big swollen cortex on it. Nalina recurvata, so the leaves curve, so curvata.
Yeah.
And it's a fabulous Central American plant for dry to arid areas.
And
Fabulous
it's
thing.
one of those kind of 70s and 80s house plants that was tortured in pots and verandas,
Yes.
which you don't often see planted out. But there's that wonderful garden in California, Lotus Land.
Oh,
And I
yes.
know that the owner there in the 50s collected specimens and planted them in a walkway, and it's
It's
absolutely stunning.
almost surreal. It's a really weird sort of a plant, but obviously if you can show its trunk off, you would. In fact, they've done just the right thing here. They've surrounded by gravel. They haven't planted anything up against it so that you can show off that amazing swollen base.
So if you've got the climate for it, obviously it's frost tender, but
Yeah.
it's an amazing garden specimen, isn't it?
Oh, it is. It's a wonderful thing. And of course, they did restrict them in pots all over the place back in the 70s, but they don't have a particularly big root system either. So they can survive quite well in sort of dreadful root-bound conditions that would probably kill your average plant anyway. And they're still there and alive. It's fabulous.
And if you want to kind of do this or do the Lotus Garden walkway with them, you often find them in flea markets or online selling platforms. People are giving them away from
Hard rubbish sometimes
rubbish.
if you're driving along.
dead relatives' houses. So anyway, a great thing to collect and plant out because I think they look stunning. And
Yep.
I used to hate them in the 70s and 80s because I can remember them.
Yeah.
But I have a whole new appreciation for them now.
You see, you've grown
I've
as a
matured in
horticulturalist.
your presence, Mr.
Yes,
Ryan.
exactly. So
All
there
right,
you go.
on to the next.
Yes, let's go and have a look at another one down there.
So, Stephen, we're right by the front gate, and I'm just going to so cleverly show
Oh,
you.
here we go.
Ta-da! The front gate's the Botanic Gardens.
Or at least to the previous bit of the Botanic Gardens.
Yes. And the thing is, this little bed, well, hardly little, but if we can just put that back there.
Yes, that's better.
The most amazing, mad collection of fantastic plants,
Yep.
many of which we've made actually standalone videos about. So
All
let's
right.
start at this end, and this is going to be quite wobbly, viewers. So we're going to
here we
walk
go.
and talk.
Yes.
At this
Very
end,
organic, this filming.
okay, so this end,
Yes.
this plant here struck my attention.
All right.
Tell the viewers.
Well, that's a Strelitzia, but it's not the common bird of paradise plant.
No.
It's the more uncommon reed-like one, which is parvifolia, which means narrow-leafed.
Oh, okay.
Juncea, which means like a rush.
Oh,
So Strelitzia parvifolia subspecies Juncea. So it gets the same sort of orange and blue bird-like
flowers.
flowers, but you get this virtually leafless effect. The leaf is actually that little split bit at the very top, and you'll find some that are actually proper leaves in the centre there, but it's basically living off its stems. So the stems do all of the photosynthesizing.
it looks like one of those Sansevierias, and that's what I thought it was.
Yeah, so well, it has that sort of look about it. Although I have to say, Sansevierias have now been put into Dracaena, so that's getting all too complicated for you, I know. But anyway, so there you go. So Strelitzia parvifolia subspecies Juncea. So lovely plant.
And they do incredibly well in Melbourne because they love our climate, bloom, and are quite
Yeah,
happy.
and here they're in, I would imagine, seriously root-infested soil. They don't get irrigated. It's actually semi-shady, which is unusual because the Strelitzias often do very well in an open, sunny spot. But this plant, or plants, are happy here. It's flowered. There's a old flower spike in the middle of it. So it's growing well, and it's a wonderful textural plant.
And it's in semi-shade, Stephen,
Yes.
because what is above us there?
Oh, goodness me, yes. Great camera angle you just got. These are a fabulous collection of Cussonias, which we went and talked about with Lyle at Rorama Nursery. So there's a whole range of different species, natalensis, paniculata. There's a whole range of them through here. There must be 6 or 7 different species of Cussonias, and they're fabulous. I just love the bold foliages and those remarkable inflorescences.
And there's a couple of them in bloom quite differently too.
Yeah.
This one, what did you say this one was?
That one is Cussonia natalensis, which is one that goes deciduous, and it looks more like a giant liquid amber or something.
I was going to say, I actually thought it was a maple struggling with Cussonia, but there we are.
Yeah, so there you go.
Looking tree. And just there, very clever, is wonderful Haemanthus. Now, we saw those in bloom a few months ago at
Burnley Gardens,
and now there's the wonderful seed pods.
Yeah.
Now, moving along here,
Oh.
here is a little cluster of plants in the Stephen Ryan National Collection.
Well, yes, only just this one.
But yeah, so this is an Acanthus.
Yes, so it's one of the woody acanthuses from Africa, and they're really prickly. I should have warned you. This one, I think, is Acanthus eminens. So when it comes to flower, it will have a spike of very pale blue flowers on it. It suckers like there's no tomorrow, so it's a thug if it's happy.
So you've mentioned that with the other, so what are the other two? We've looked at the red one and the pink one, and they are...
Well, the red one is Acanthus senii, which comes from Ethiopia.
Yeah.
And the pink one is Acanthus polystachya, and that is suckering all through my garden. It is amazing.
I've never actually seen the suckering, but here...
Yes, it's obvious here.
This is a glade of suckering.
Yeah, you can see the babies down there just coming up. So it's a plant that you put in with foreknowledge of what you're going to end up with. I always see it as a useful plant to have because if the suckers go out further than I want, I can dig them up, put them in a pot and sell them to another sucker. Yeah, you're getting to know this far too well. Yeah.
All right, we're moving along because the next thing I want to look at is this incredible Euphorbia here.
Yes, look at it. Isn't this a remarkable thing?
I guess the other thing for us just to mention too, we're in a maritime climate here, but just how happy these plants are.
Oh yeah, no irrigation.
No.
They really are very happy. This one has even got a support to hold it up because it's growing so fast and big, and of course leaning forward slightly.
Which is an issue in moister climates for drier, well, particularly cacti and succulents. They can grow so much because there's too much rain and fall over.
And they do get really heavy with moisture.
So which Euphorbia is this?
This one is Euphorbia ammak. It's one of the sort of Arabian Peninsula, sort of that's northern Africa area. And of course the Euphorbias are very common all the way through Africa and Madagascar. Madagascar's got oodles of them. And they're sort of the equivalent to the New World cacti. But they're not cactuses, they're a completely different plant group. But it's showing that sort of co-evolving thing that a lot of plants do. So they pick up the same strategy for survival purposes. So many of the Euphorbias grow like cactuses, or cactuses grow quite a lot like euphorbias. Who knows which way around it is? But they both use much the same techniques.
And this one, I mean, you would almost call it variegated, would you?
Well, yes, it is in fact lightly variegated through there, or is it lightly green through there? So it is one of the sort of ghostly looking ones, which I quite like.
I do too. And then above it is one of the tree aloes. So we made a Euphorbia video with Lyle.
Yes, we certainly did.
Which is not very far from here.
Yeah.
And we made a video about aloes with Sue, who has the most amazing collection.
Yep.
And so in here is a tree aloe with the
in amongst everything
with the
else.
Euphorbias. I just love this border. It's so creative.
It's not for those who like their pretty things. It's not a flower border, but it's a very gutsy, strong foliage border.
Although I would say when the Acanthus is in bloom and the Haemanthus, I mean, they're
there will be showy flowers.
pretty colourful.
Yeah, but they're not roses
No,
or,
or
they're not
delphiniums.
cottagey things or delphiniums.
We ain't in a perennial border,
No,
kids.
we're definitely not. So there is some flower in this border, but really, when you think about it, it's all about structure, form, shape, and texture.
All right.
And that's what it's about.
And there are a few more things fitting that bill
Up that way.
that way.
Yeah.
We just have to keep going,
Yeah.
Stephen.
Yes, we can't help ourselves.
I would not have noticed this tree apart from these incredible Dyckia seed pods.
Yeah, which are rather handsome.
Yeah,
I have
so-
to say, if you were here in the spring,
Yeah.
when this is in flower, it has incredible bright scarlet red flowers on it. And I remember seeing one in the Botanic Gardens in Melbourne covered in parrots, having a wonderful feed on the nectar in the blooms.
And it is?
This is Schotia latifolia, the bush boar bean, and it comes from southern Africa, and it is a truly remarkable tree. Fabulous evergreen, rich glossy foliage, brilliant scarlet flowers, and these remarkable pods.
Yeah, and I guess the bean reference, I see the bean reference now.
Yeah, yes, you can see that.
But now there is the tree in front of us, which we now really need to engage
Yes,
with, because
and
it's just...
our viewers need to also as well.
So,
Yes.
this mound of pink, tell us everything.
Yes, well, it is one of the iconic trees of the world, Ceiba Speciosa, the pink floss tree, and it's South American, but it's in Malvaceae, or at least is considered to be in Malvaceae now, the family Malvaceae, and that's the same family that the Adansonias, the baobabs or boabs of South Africa, Northern Australia and Madagascar, also belong in the same plant family.
Well, the trunk, the form of the tree very much looks like that.
Oh, yes.
I get that.
Yeah, so it's,
But the flowers.
oh, the flowers are stunning, and I have to say the Adansonia's flowers can be stunning as well, but many of them are such big trees that you can't get close to the blooms. We are so fortunate to be almost surrounded by the flowers of Ceiba Speciosa.
And we're filming this in April, and you have these pink blossoms against the blue sky. It's cherry blossom time in Japan right now,
Yes.
which makes me think this is kind of like the Southern Hemisphere alternative reality cherry blossom moment, because we have all these pink petals
Falling down around us.
in April.
It is sort of cherry blossom on steroids, I have to say. The flowers are enormous.
But tell me about the foliage, because what you can see is you've got moments of fresh green
Yeah.
growth, and then you've got deciduous parts which seem to have most of the flowers. So what does it do in terms of its growth?
A lot of these trees tend to shed their foliage to a large extent when they come into flower. So if in fact they flower on just one section of the tree, the bits of the tree that don't flower will often hold their leaves, but the sections that flower heavily are going to shed their leaves.
Right.
I guess that's a strategy to encourage pollinators and things, because they're going, wow, look at me, I'm here.
Well, how could you miss those flowers? But anyway.
Yeah, so there you go. And also, of course, a lot of these trees come from periodically very dry climates.
Yeah.
So they'll often shed leaves, not like a deciduous Northern Hemisphere tree would. They will shed their leaves if things get too dry and hot for them. So they'll go into a, I guess, dry season dormancy.
And we saw this tree in the Melbourne Botanic Gardens. It must have been this time last year.
I think
now,
it was
actually.
this time last year.
And it was a very tall specimen, so it's impossible to see the flowers really. But these ones are literally
Yes, they're at eye level. It's fabulous.
It's a
Yep.
beautiful
We can
specimen.
actually get in and look at them, and they are quite remarkable. You've got sort of the pink outer parts of the petals. The centre of the flower is almost yellow.
like a banana.
Yeah, it's almost banana coloured. And then you've got these strange purplish stripy bits in the flower. It's gone all out to look for its pollinators.
It's so exotic. All right.
It is.
One more thing for us to look at.
Yes, because we could be here for hours if we don't stop soon.
Okay, so moving on from these wonderful trees, the last, I mean, we could go on this bed. But
And I'd like to.
The last thing I want to look at is this, because we've also crossed paths with this in the Melbourne Botanic Gardens.
We certainly have.
Goodness me.
How is that for a plant? I mean, it's just outrageously weird and different.
And so healthy.
Yes, it's doing really well. It's still holding lots of foliage. When it gets really, really dry, all the leaves will drop off and you end up with a grey-brown trunk covered in rather nasty thorns. And it's Alluaudia procera. And I've seen this growing in the wilds of Madagascar. It grows in what they call the spiny forests in southern Madagascar. I'm hoping to lead a tour in there in 26. If anybody's interested, they might like to get in touch. And you see lemurs, even though they've got soft hands and fingernails because they're primates.
Paws. Are they paws?
No, they've got hands. They're
Hands.
primates.
Okay.
They've got
Yeah,
hands.
yeah.
And they're soft. They don't have any sort of
All right.
nasty sort of
Yes.
things. And they will run up the outside of these plants with no fear or whatever of the prickliness of the Alluaudias. They'll eat the nectar and the flowers from the top.
And you can see this one has blooms.
Yes, it's had flowers on the top of it, and they're really weird. They're in the family Dideraceae, and the family Dideraceae is completely and utterly restricted to Madagascar. And there's only, I think, 3 or maybe 4 genera within the family, which includes Dyckia and a couple of others. And they're all weird spiny forest plants from southern Madagascar. And at one stage they were included in Carpark, which was the, believe it or not, the carnation family.
No.
Yes, but they're now in a family of their own, apparently Dideraceae, which makes logical sense. But they must be distantly related to a carnation somehow.
Well,
God knows.
very distantly. The most amazing thing. So a couple of things. Firstly, I'm really happy to see it outside in Melbourne.
Yeah.
You often see this as like an indoor plant rarity for cacti and
Succulent collectors, yes.
This is such a happy specimen. The one in the Botanic Gardens, I think, is newer planted in Melbourne. Yeah. And I have one in a pot, and I just decided, you know what, it's just going to go outside. Now I have full confidence.
Yes, well, certainly if you've seen it growing in the wild, as long as it doesn't go somewhere where it's likely to get too wet or frosted, because it won't tolerate any real level of frost, it should be happy.
Oh, stunning thing.
It is.
Now, we were going to finish up, but
well,
I'm just seeing the blossoms on that tree.
Yeah.
There's big cream flowers. What on earth is that?
It's another Ceiba.
Oh.
So we've just talked about the pink one. May I present a white one?
All right. I'll just show you the picture. We don't need to linger because we need to wrap this up, Stephen.
Yeah, at some point we do. So I'm having such a lot of fun in the Geelong Botanic Gardens. I don't want to stop, but there you go. What can we say?
Well, Stephen, the 21st century garden.
Here at the Geelong Botanic Gardens.
Oh,
and what fun it's been.
It is. And we've only scratched the surface with just this small area of plants.
We could have the sequel any time now.
There are so many interesting, rare and wonderful things, and relatively new. So a lot of the planting is still new, but so many established trees. And behind us, what are these amazing cycads?
Oh, they're Australian native Lepidozamias, Perovskianas. So they come from northern New South Wales up into Queensland, and they are a beautiful cycad.
It's very elegant, because often cycads don't have that kind of elegance that a palm does, but this certainly does.
Yeah, some of them are quite stiff. But yes, this one is a rather lovely relaxed foliaged one, which I quite like. Being relaxed.
Well, many thanks to the Geelong Botanic Gardens for allowing us to wander around. We haven't even entered the front gates yet.
Yes, we're still within the sort of outskirts of the gardens.
Yeah.
But I would recommend it as a visit for anybody who happens to be in the Geelong district or even further afield.
Yeah.
It's a fabulous place to visit. You'll see all sorts of beautiful plants, lovely landscape setting.
Yeah.
It's very popular with the locals. So
it is. There have been lots of children around, so you may have heard some screams of joy. Yes. They weren't always ours.
Yeah, exactly. So yes, it's school holidays here as well. So we didn't think that through terribly carefully before we booked in the filming day. But anyhow.
But you know what? It is great to see so many people engaging with the garden. And I think we've been to a lot of botanic gardens, including the Melbourne Botanic Gardens, right in the city centre. I've never seen so many people, and particularly kids, engaging with the garden. It's great to see.
They're loving it.
Yeah.
So, yes, they're really engaging with plants.
So, if you want to know what we're doing next week, you'll have to hit subscribe.
And don't forget our Monday shorts. So if you've got a question you'd like to ask me, pop it in the comment section below. Tell me where you're from for some context, and we will get round to answering it on a Monday.
We will indeed. But until then, we'll see you next time.
All right, bye all.